At 6:52 in the morning, Callan Pruitt stood at his kitchen counter with a mug of coffee in one hand and the coffee maker's carafe in the other, and he heard an engine. He set the carafe down. He heard another, then a third, lower, closer, the kind of engine that had never once turned down a dirt road in its life. He walked to the kitchen window and looked out. The road in front of his house was buried, black SUVs, silver sedans with tinted glass, one gray Rolls-Royce parked directly across from his mailbox, its engine idling with the quiet arrogance of something that had never needed to announce itself. The convoy stretched back far enough that he couldn't see where it ended. Across the road, his neighbor, Bertie Yount, stood on his porch in his bathrobe, with a coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth, staring. The landline rang. Callan looked at it. He picked up on the third ring. "Mr. Pruitt." The voice was controlled, efficient, the voice of someone who had spent years learning to sound calm in situations that were not calm. "My name is Dennis Hale. I'm the executive assistant to the CEO of Ashby Industrial. I'm calling to ask whether Miss Ashby is currently at your residence." Callan looked toward the hallway. The door to the small bedroom at the end of it, the room he had made up the night before for a stranger with a flat tire and nowhere to go, was still closed. He looked back out the window at the row of black hoods and chrome grills, then back at the door. "Give me a minute," he said, and he set the phone down on the counter without hanging up. He walked toward the hallway. He had no idea what he was going to say when he got there. To understand how Soren Ashby ended up on a mountain road in Harlan County, Kentucky, at 11 on a Friday night, with a flat tire and a phone showing 2 bars of signal, you had to go back to the morning she left Chicago. She had not brought Dennis. She had not told the board. She had pulled out of the Ashby Industrial parking garage at 2 in the afternoon in a rented sedan with a printed map on the passenger seat and driven south because she had decided, sometime around midnight the week before, that if she was going to sign a distribution contract for a market she had never set foot in, she was going to see it first with her own eyes. Douglas Kane had told her not to. He had told her there were field reports, demographic analyses, 3 separate assessments commissioned from regional consultants, whose names she had approved. He had said it with the measured patience of someone explaining something to someone who did not need to be there. "We have everything we need, Soren. You don't have to go." She went. The drive south was long, and the roads narrowed the farther she went. Past Lexington, the highway shrank to 2 lanes, and past that it shrank to 1. By the time she turned onto the county road the GPS had directed her toward, it was dark, in the way that rural roads get dark, not the dim of a city at midnight, but the absolute black of hills and trees with no light sources for miles. She was 11 miles from the nearest town when the rear tire gave out. Not a blowout. Worse than a blowout, somehow. Just a slow, soft, settling, the back end of the car dropping on one side with a sound she felt in her palms on the steering wheel before she heard it with her ears. She pulled to the side of the road and sat for a moment. She checked for a spare. There wasn't one. Rental cars rarely had them anymore, which she had not thought to verify before leaving. She checked her phone. 2 bars. She opened a ride-share app, and it told her the nearest driver was 54 minutes away and might not be able to reach her location. She read that twice. The temperature was 38 degrees Fahrenheit. She was wearing a blazer. She started walking. The road was unpaved past the first bend, and her heels were wrong for it in every way, but she walked anyway because there was no other option. She had walked 200 yards when she saw the light 1 yellow window through the trees, set back from the road on a rise, the kind of light that meant someone was still awake at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. She walked up the gravel drive and knocked. The man who opened the door was tall, dark-eyed, with the build of someone who worked with his hands every day and didn't think about it. There was dried grease on the backs of his knuckles. He looked at her blazer, heels, no coat, standing in the cold on his porch, and he didn't ask her name. He didn't ask where she'd come from. "Tire or engine?" he said. "Tier. You got a spare?" "No." He nodded once, stepped back, and held the door open. He didn't make conversation while he changed the tire. He worked with a flashlight clamped under his arm, and a hydraulic jack he'd pulled from the bed of his truck, and she stood to the side with her arms crossed against the cold, and watched, because there was nothing else she could do. When he was done, he said the car was fine to drive, but the mountain roads at night were narrow, and the drop-offs on the curves weren't marked well. He said the small bedroom at the end of the hall had clean sheets. She slept better than she had in months. She did not know why. In the morning, before the house stirred, she found her phone charged to 40% on the hallway outlet. She folded the blanket into neat corners and set it on the bed, pulled the door shut carefully behind her, and left $200 in cash on the kitchen counter, double what a roadside tire change would run from any shop in the county. Callan came downstairs at 6:30 and found the money. He looked at it for a moment. Then he put it in the kitchen drawer without counting it, and poured himself a coffee and stood at the window looking at the road, which was empty and quiet and entirely ordinary. It was not ordinary for long. He came out onto the porch, and Dennis Hale was already stepping down from the lead vehicle, one hand extended with a business card between two fingers. Callan did not look at the business card. He was looking past Dennis at the passenger door of the second car. Soren Ashby stepped out into the morning. The light was full and clear, the kind of late autumn light that doesn't soften anything. The night before, she had been a shape at the edge of a flashlight beam, a blazer, a voice, a problem he could solve. Now she was a face, dark gold hair, sharp jaw. The way she moved crossing the gravel was the same way she had moved up his porch steps in the dark, deliberate and unhurried, as though the terrain was something to be navigated and not something to adjust for. He recognized her in the first 3 seconds. 2 years before, when he had been putting together the paperwork for a small business administration loan, a real one, with a business plan and projected revenue and a site survey he'd done himself, he had spent 2 weeks studying the Appalachian equipment distribution market. That meant reading annual reports, trade coverage, regional analyses. Ashby Industrial appeared in all of it. So did its CEO. He had seen her photograph in a Forbes Midwest feature, and in the header of a quarterly earnings summary, and in the caption of an industry conference photo taken in Nashville. He had looked at her face on a screen in this same kitchen, at this same counter, researching the company that he hoped would someday be a client. 6 weeks after he submitted his loan application, the rejection letter arrived. It cited the bank's assessment of market saturation and risk exposure. At the bottom, above the printed bank address, was a signature. S. Ashby, Chief Executive Officer, Ashby Industrial Group. He had read it once. Then he had put it in the drawer of the side table on the porch, where he put things he didn't know what to do with yet. He had not made the connection the night before. The porch light was yellow, and she had been standing in the dark, and he had been half asleep, and whatever he had known about Soren Ashby from an article photograph, he had not been looking for her face on his doorstep. He was looking for it now. She stopped in front of him. She recognized him. He could see that plainly. The small recalibration in her expression, the piece clicking into place. She said, "I came back to thank you properly. I'm sorry I left the way I did. I didn't want to wake the house." "You didn't," he said. "The money I left. It was enough." Dennis stepped forward and began talking about compensation, about inconvenience, about Ashby Industrial's appreciation for his hospitality. Callan let him finish the first sentence and then looked past him to Soren. "What brought you to Harlan in the first place?" Dennis paused. Soren looked at Callan for a moment. "Market research," she said. "We're finalizing a distribution contract for this region. I wanted to see the territory myself before I signed anything." "Whose field report were you working from?" She had not expected the question. Not the directness of it, and not the fact that someone standing on a gravel drive in Harlan County, Kentucky, would know immediately what question to ask. "My CFO's team," she said. "Douglas Kane." Callan nodded. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in it, something so small she almost missed it. A recognition, or a calculation, or both. He didn't say anything more about it. He looked at her. "Do you want to see the back of the property?" Dennis said they had a hotel reservation in Harlan and a 2 o'clock call with the legal team. Soren said, "Dennis." One word, flat and clear. Dennis stopped talking. Ren came around the corner of the house at that moment, 8 years old, backpack still on, coming back from a friend's house across the hill. He stopped when he saw the cars. He looked at his father. He looked at the woman standing in the driveway, who was clearly not from here, in the way that only took about half a second to determine in a county like Harlan. He studied her for a moment, with the serious, measuring look he used for things he hadn't decided about yet. Soren looked at him. She didn't smile in the automatic, overly warm way adults sometimes did with children they didn't know what to do with. She just looked back, steady, and then nodded once. Ren nodded back. Then he walked past all of them into the house without a word. Callan led Soren around to the back of the property. The shop was a partial structure, concrete foundation, framing on 3 walls, the 4th open, covered by a sheet of corrugated metal that kept the equipment dry. The machines inside were organized with a precision that didn't match a casual hobby. Tools hung on pegboard in outlined silhouettes, so that anything missing was immediately apparent. A welding station, a metal lathe, a drill press that had been modified in ways that weren't factory standard, not improvised around a limitation, but deliberately adjusted by someone who understood the machine well enough to improve on the factory's decision. On the inside wall of the framing, tacked with masking tape, were blueprints, not sketches, full technical drawings, dimensioned and annotated, done in a clean drafting hand with load calculations written in pencil along the margins. She stepped closer. The calculations were not rough estimates. They were the kind of numbers that went on engineering specifications, the kind that had to be right, because something was going to be built to them. Soren looked at them for a long moment. "Who drew these?" "I did." "Where did you study?" "Purdue." "Then 9 years with Caterpillar, engineering division." She stopped. She looked at him, really looked. The way she looked at things when she was revising an assumption in real time, when the picture she'd built in her head needed to be taken apart and rebuilt from different pieces. The man in front of her had changed a rental car tire in the dark without complaint, handed her a blanket, and pointed her to a room and asked nothing in return, and was now standing in a half-finished shop he had clearly designed himself and had not been able to finish. None of those things should belong to the same person, and yet here they all were. "Why did you leave?" she said. He looked at the unfinished concrete of the foundation, the rebar still sticking up at the far corner where the 4th wall would go. "Had something more important to do," he said. He didn't explain further. She didn't ask again. She looked at the blueprints one more time, and understood, without needing to be told, that the explanation wasn't hers to ask for. Dennis had gone back into town by noon. Soren told him she needed more time on site for the market assessment. He accepted this with the practiced expression of someone who had learned, after 4 years, when the conversation was over. She stayed. Callan made lunch sandwiches, black coffee, nothing deliberate about it. She opened her laptop at the kitchen table and worked, and the kitchen had the quiet of 2 people who had each decided the other was not an inconvenience. Ren came in from the back porch, sat down across from her, and pulled a sandwich from the plate without asking anyone. "You sell machines?" he said. "That's right. What kind?" She listed a few product lines. Ren listened with the expression of someone conducting a real inventory. "Dad likes the 5-ton and up range," he said. "Says the smaller ones are built for people who don't actually use them." Callan said, "Ren, I'm just saying what he told me." Soren looked at Callan. He shook his head very slightly, but the corner of his mouth moved in a way that wasn't quite a smile, and wasn't quite not one either. She walked to the end of the house later to find better signal for an outgoing email, and that was when she saw the drawer, the side table on the porch, the one with the single drawer. It was open an inch, and she could see the corner of an envelope, a white envelope with a corporate logo in the upper left corner, a logo she knew the way you know your own company's branding in your sleep, without thinking. Ashby Industrial Group. She stood there for a moment. She didn't open the drawer. She went back inside. "You have a letter from Ashby Industrial," she said. Callan looked at her. "Yes. What kind of letter?" "A rejection. Short. Factual. Nothing in his voice to make it easy for her or hard for her." She sat down at the table. "Rejecting what?" He looked at her for a moment, the kind of pause that wasn't hesitation so much as deciding how much of the truth to hand over at once. Then, SBA loan application. 2 years ago. I wanted to finish the shop. Soren was quiet. She knew the mechanics of it. Ashby Industrial's banking relationships in the region, the informal leverage that came with being the dominant equipment supplier in a county where every farm and extraction operation ran on machines her company made or serviced. She knew that Douglas put a stack of co-endorsement denials on her desk every quarter and called them routine. She had signed them with the same pen she used for everything else. "I didn't know it was you," she said. "I know," he said. He had said the same thing the night before, about the tire. Both times it had been offered the same way, not as forgiveness and not as accusation. Just as a fact, stated plainly, because it was true, and because he was the kind of person who did not say untrue things to make a moment easier to be in. Douglas called at 3 in the afternoon. She was standing on the porch when her phone lit up and she let it ring twice before she answered. Soren. His voice had exactly the right amount of concern in it, the amount a person puts there, intentionally, measured out. "We've been trying to reach you since last night. Are you all right?" "I'm fine. I'm in Harlan." A pause. Half a beat shorter than it would be if the concern were real. "What happened?" "Flat tire. I stayed the night locally. I'm finishing the survey." The pause extended by just a fraction. She had learned to read his pauses the way you learn to read weather, not from any single sign, but from the accumulation of small things that didn't quite add up to what they were supposed to be. This one was the pause of someone recalibrating. "There's a board issue that needs you in person," he said. "Monday, at the latest. A few things have come up with the Japan partnership that require direct sign-off." "I heard you," she said. And she ended the call. She stood on the porch with the phone in her hand and looked at the valley. She thought about the field reports Douglas had handed her, clean, detailed, organized, everything she would have needed to sign the distribution contract without setting foot outside Chicago. She thought about how readily he had always provided exactly what was needed to make the next decision, and how rarely the reports had ever surprised her, and how that had always felt like competence when it might have been something else entirely. She had run a $2.4 billion company for 4 years, on information that one man had curated for her. The thought settled in her chest, with a particular weight. She was still standing there, when Callan came out with 2 mugs of coffee, handed her one without asking, and sat on the porch steps. She sat beside him. The valley below the house was going dark at its edges, the ridgelines turning the particular deep blue they turned at the end of October, when the air came down from the higher elevations and the light went sideways. "He needs more time," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "How much does he need?" Callan said. She looked at him. The question was so precise, it almost felt like a key. Not what is he worried about, not what is the board's position, not what are the legal parameters, just how much time does he need and why. "More than he should," she said. "The Japan deal," Callan said. "Not a question either." She looked at him more carefully. "You know about it?" "Read about it. Local paper covered it in August. Said there was internal opposition." He was quiet for a moment, looking at the valley. "Douglas Kane's name came up in a contract dispute I had with Ashby in 2022. Equipment supply agreement. I filed suit and lost, but the original contract had his approval signature on it. Soren was still. I'm not connecting dots that aren't there," he said. "I'm just telling you what I know. The stars came out fast at this elevation, the way they did when there was no competing light for 20 miles in any direction." She looked up at them. She had been in rooms where billions changed hands, and she had held herself completely still for those moments, because stillness was a skill she had developed and refined the way you develop any professional skill, through practice, through repetition, through needing it badly enough to get good at it. This was different. This was standing on a porch in Harlan County with the October cold coming off the hills and not feeling the need to hold herself still at all. "You knew who I was," she said. "This morning. When I stepped out of the car." "Yes. And you still?" She stopped. "It was cold last night," he said. He stood and went inside. She sat on the porch steps with her coffee and looked at the stars and let that sit where it landed, which was somewhere in the center of her chest, in a place she had not recently had occasion to use. She called her private attorney at 7 the next morning. She asked for a full pull of Douglas Kane's approval records from 2021 through the present, every co-endorsement, every distribution contract, every capital expenditure over $25,000 that bore his signature in the Appalachian region. Callan was already in the shop. By the time she hung up, she could hear the slow, methodical sound of him working, not urgent, not hurried, the rhythm of someone doing a task that had a beginning and an end, and no need for drama in between. She opened her laptop and waited. The attorney called back 40 minutes later. His voice had the quality of someone who had found something and was measuring out how to say it. "Soren, you need to look at what I'm sending you." She looked. Douglas Kane had, for the past 4 years, operated a parallel equipment distribution network in the Appalachian region through a company registered in his wife's maiden name. The company held no public profile, no website, no marketing presence. It existed solely as a distribution intermediary purchasing equipment from Ashby Industrial at the preferred partner rate Douglas had approved in his own capacity as CFO, then reselling into the regional market at full retail. The margin was not documented anywhere in Ashby's books because Douglas had structured the intermediary specifically to ensure it wouldn't be. To protect that margin, he needed to prevent competing service operations from establishing themselves in the region. He had done this systematically, using Ashby's banking relationships to influence loan applications from small mechanical shops and independent distributors, flagging them as credit risks, endorsing their rejections as routine portfolio management. 47 applications over 4 years. The estimated internal fraud figure was $3.1 million. The Japan partnership had required, as a condition of the term sheet, a full audit of Ashby's regional distribution chain. If the audit ran, Douglas's network would surface inside 72 hours. He had spent 6 months finding ways to delay the deal. When he couldn't delay it further, he had started working to slow Soren down, keeping her out of the field, keeping the field reports controlled, buying time. She was reading through the 3rd attachment when she heard the back door open. Callan came into the kitchen and filled a glass of water at the sink. He saw her face and said, "Bad? Worse than I thought." He sat down across from her. He didn't rush her. She set the laptop so he could see the screen, and she told him the shape of it, not the legal language, not the accounting structure, just the shape. "This is what he built. This is why he needed me not to come here. This is what your loan application was." Callan was quiet for a moment. "The 2022 parts contract," he said. "The suit I filed. I still have the full file. Original purchase orders, the communication chain, the terms of the agreement before they changed it on me. Everything." A pause. "I kept it because I thought I might try again someday." "Do you still have it?" she said. "Filing cabinet in the shop. Would you be willing to provide it?" He looked at her directly, the way he had looked at her from the beginning, without performing anything, without putting anything between his face and what he actually meant. "Depends on what you're going to do with it." "The right thing," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, pushed back his chair, and went out through the back. She heard the shop door. She heard a drawer opening, then the particular sound of a file box being lifted from a shelf. He came back in carrying a blue accordion file, thick with paper, and set it on the table in front of her. That afternoon she stood with him in the yard, the late October light coming flat and gold across the valley. Dennis was in the car with his phone, giving them space in the pointed way that meant he had figured out enough to know when to stay back. She looked at the half-built shop, the concrete foundation that stopped 2/3 of the way through, the rebar still waiting at the corner, the framing that had been finished, and then stopped mid-wall because stopping was the only option left. "How long has it been sitting?" she said. 2 years. Since the rejection?" "Yes." She was quiet. Because there had always been another stack waiting, and Douglas had always said they were routine, and she had believed him because she had other things to think about, and he had given her no reason not to. She had no defense for it. The only true thing about it was that she hadn't known. "I'm sorry," she said. "It wasn't your fault," he said. "I signed it. You didn't know." He said it without inflection, without any effort to make it smaller or larger than it was. It was the truth. He stated the truth. That was all. She looked at him, not the way she looked at a supplier, not the way she looked at a potential partner. Just the way one person looks at another person when they are seeing them clearly for the first time and understanding that what they see is real. "Do you still have the original drawings?" she said. "For the shop. I never threw them out." "The same drawings? From the beginning?" "Same ones," he said. "Only ones I ever made." He went inside and came back with a cardboard tube, the kind architects use, and unrolled the contents across the porch table. 11 pages of technical drawings, pencil annotations in the window, annotations in the margins, load calculations, equipment layout, ceiling height specifications. She looked at them for a long time. They were not rough. They were not a wishful sketch. They were the plans of someone who had known exactly what they were building and had built it in their head 100 times before the concrete was ever poured. "Could you finish this?" she said. "Money's not the obstacle," he said. "Permitting was. They kept stalling my variance application. I can clear that." He looked at her. Not with gratitude. She didn't want his gratitude, and he seemed to understand that. With something more like the quiet assessment of someone deciding whether a thing is real. Then he nodded. The back door banged open, and Ren came down the steps at a run. He was carrying a folded piece of paper, which he held out to Soren with both hands, the way children offer things they've made, when they want you to have it but aren't sure how to say so. She unfolded it. A pencil drawing a building with a small sign above the door. Smoke coming from a metal chimney. A man standing in front of it. The proportions were not quite right. The man was missing ears. The building was perfect. "I drew Dad's shop," Ren said. "The way it's going to look. You can keep it." She held the drawing. Dennis's voice came from the driveway, calling to say they were behind schedule. She looked at the drawing one more time, then folded it carefully and put it in the inside pocket of her jacket where it wouldn't get bent. She shook Callan's hand, and then, at the last moment, didn't let go quite as fast as she should have, just a second longer. Then she walked to the car. Callan stood on the porch steps and watched the car go. When the last of the taillights disappeared around the bend, he sat down on the top step and looked at the valley for a while before he went back inside. On Monday morning, Soren walked into the Ashby Industrial Conference Room on the 41st floor with the blue accordion file from a mechanic's shop in Harlan County and set it on the table next to the internal audit report and the attorney's summary. 5 years of documentation, assembled from 2 separate sources, neither of which had been intended to align with the other. They aligned perfectly. Douglas came in at 9. He crossed the room with the deliberate ease of a man who had spent 4 years learning to move through that room, as though he belonged to it more than anyone else did. He glanced at the table, the legal folders, the audit binder, the blue file, and something in his expression registered and then smoothed over, the way a window fogs and clears in the same breath. He sat down across from her. He had known about the 2022 lawsuit. He had known the file existed. He had calculated, correctly, that a failed civil suit from a one-man shop in eastern Kentucky would never find its way into a boardroom in Chicago. The calculation had been reasonable. It had been wrong. Soren went through it piece by piece. The original parts contract and the unauthorized revisions, the list of 47 loan applications flagged for denial between 2021 and the present, cross-referenced against the regional distribution database, the intermediary company, the margin structure, the paper trail that ran from Douglas's approval signature to his wife's company registration to the regional accounts. $3.1 million moved through a structure designed to be invisible inside Ashby's own books. She did not raise her voice. She had never found it useful to raise her voice when the facts were doing the work. Douglas tried once. He leaned back in his chair with the practiced calm of someone who had survived difficult meetings before, and he said, "You're taking the word of a welder in Harlan County over 4 years of Purdue," Soren said. "Engineering division at Caterpillar for 9 years. His documentation is cleaner than anything your team produced." Douglas said nothing. Dennis Hale, who had been silent throughout, placed a folder on the table. It contained a record of every instance in which Soren had been redirected away from Appalachian field access since 2023, every rescheduled site visit, every report substituted for a direct inspection, every communication in which Douglas or someone from his team had suggested that the field data they had was sufficient. 4 years of management, documented in email threads and meeting minutes that Dennis had been pulling since Saturday morning, going back through his own archived copies of things he had, at the time, simply forwarded, without thinking about why he was forwarding them. He set the folder down and looked at Douglas steadily. "I've worked with him for 4 years," he said. "I know what it looks like when he's covering something." Douglas did not answer. He sat for a moment, and something in his face went through a change that was less about the room and more about the arithmetic, the specific arithmetic of a person calculating what the next 24 hours would look like and arriving at a number they could not dispute. He stood. He picked up nothing from the table. He left. The door closed. The room was quiet. Soren looked at the blue accordion file sitting in the center of the table and thought about a shop filing cabinet in Harlan County and a man who had kept his records in case he needed them again, and how those two things had found each other. The following morning, the Ashby Industrial Board met in full session. Soren presented for 40 minutes. The vote was 8-1. Douglas Kane was terminated effective immediately. The matter was referred to the SEC and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Illinois. The Japan partnership audit was reinstated, the term sheet extended by 60 days at the Japanese firm's request, the deal intact. The restitution clause in the board resolution required an independent audit of all regional loan applications that had been denied due to Ashby-related banking influence between 2021 and the present. Any small business that could demonstrate direct harm from those denials would be eligible for compensation. The audit firm spent 3 weeks compiling the list. Callan Pruitt's file was the first one processed. It was also the most complete 40 pages of original documentation, organized chronologically, in a blue accordion file that had been sitting in a shop filing cabinet in Harlan County for 2 years waiting for someone to ask. She called him from the lobby of the building after the board meeting ended. He was in the shop. She could hear the background sound of the welder running, and then the sound stopped and there was quiet. "It's done," she said. "Douglas?" he said. "Gone. 8-1. The board referred it to federal prosecutors." She paused. "And your compensation file is first on the audit list, Callan. It's going to go through the right way this time. The real way." There was a silence on the line. Not the silence of someone who didn't know what to say, but the silence of someone sitting with a thing for a moment before speaking. Then, "Ren wanted to know if you were coming back." She was standing near the building's main entrance. Through the glass, Chicago in November was gray and fast-moving. People in coats going somewhere with the urgent efficiency of a city that did not stop for weather. She looked at it. "I've been thinking about it," she said. The Japan partnership closed in December. In the final terms of the Appalachian Regional Distribution Agreement, Pruitt Mechanical, pending completion, pending operational certification, pending a permitting variance that cleared through the Harlan County Building Office in 11 days, was listed as the first designated local technical partner. Not a charity arrangement, a contracted one, competitively selected. The first invoice went out on the 15th of the month. On the digital map on Soren's office wall, Harlan County was marked in red. She had put the mark there herself, with a fingertip, the way you mark a place you're going to go back to. 3 months later, in the first week of March, a dark sedan turned off the county road and came up the gravel drive and stopped in front of the new sign. The sign was small, mounted in steel, the letters clean and plain. Pruitt Mechanical. Below it, the shop was finished concrete and brick and a standing seam metal roof, built to the exact dimensions and specifications of a set of technical drawings that had spent 2 years in a cardboard tube waiting to become a building. Soren got out of the car. No convoy, no Dennis. A jacket she'd bought at an outfitter in Harlan on the way through, not because she'd needed to, but because she'd wanted something that fit the drive. Callan was standing in the open bay of the shop. He had heard the car on the gravel. He looked at it, at her, and his expression settled into something that was not surprise, but was something that the absence of surprise can sometimes be when it means something good. Ren came out at a run. He pulled Soren through the bay door before she had a chance to say anything and proceeded to introduce her to every piece of equipment in the shop by its technical name and rated capacity, in order, from left to right. He had clearly rehearsed this. "Dad taught me," he said, at the end. Soren looked at Callan over Ren's head. Callan shrugged, in the particular way of someone accepting responsibility for something without considering it a burden. Across the road, Bertie Yount stood at his fence in his work jacket, nodded once at Callan, and went back inside. He had never once asked what the cars had been about, back in October, or who the woman in the sedan was, or why the shop had gotten finished so fast. Some things you didn't need explained. Ren disappeared inside the house to get water, which everyone understood was a diplomatic exit and not a request for hydration. Soren and Callan stood in the center of the shop. She looked at the finished concrete floor, the walls plumb and square, the equipment placed exactly as it appeared on the 11 pages she had looked at on his porch table back in October. "You built it to the drawings," she said. "Always was the same drawings," he said. The shop was quiet in the particular way of a space that had been built right and knew it. Outside, the March light came in through the bay door at a low angle, the kind of light that is still getting used to not being winter. "I didn't come for the contract," she said. "Dennis could have sent an email." "I know," he said. She put her hand on his arm. Not a handshake, not anything professional. Just her hand, placed there, and then left there, the way you do something when you have decided to stop being cautious about it. Through the window of the shop door, a small face appeared. Observed the situation with the calm satisfaction of someone whose theory had been confirmed, and withdrew. The foundation had been there since before the night she blew a tire on a mountain road in eastern Kentucky. He had only needed someone to stop signing the rejections.